You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle. We're here today with Chris and Holly Santillo to talk about resilience and how to raise more resilient teenagers. We're going to be looking at the pillars of resilience, what resilience really is, how service factors into resilience, and the importance of both independence and connectedness, and how to teach these traits by creating a culture of learning within your family. We're also going to talk a lot about integrity, and we're going to look at what sort of are the basic mistakes that parents make a lot of times when trying to communicate about resilience and integrity, and why those strategies that we often use don't work and what we can do instead. Chris and Holly are the authors of the book Resilience Parenting, Raising Resilient Children in an Era of Detachment and Dependence. Chris is the founder and head instructor at Potomac Kenpo, a martial arts studio with 4 locations, and Holly is the founding conductor of Mount Vernon's Children Choir and a senior instructor at Potomac Kenpo. Really interested and excited to speak with Chris and Holly today. Thank you both so much for coming on the show today. So why resilience? Obviously, you guys thought it was important enough to write a whole book on resilience parenting. What is it you thought, is there not enough stuff out there on resilience? Is resilience like an underrated topic for parents today? Or what inspired you to create a book about it?
Well, I think the first was a process of elimination. We kind of wanted kids who did the dishes. So we thought about like doing the dishes parenting, but we decided that was too narrow.
Okay.
And we thought about like being a perfect human being parenting. And we decided that might be too broad. And so it was kind of like a whittling down process of finding something that, captures the essence, but at the same time isn't overly specific.
My answer used to be, Andy, that we didn't really have a lot to challenge us on a broad scope, no world war in our face, or no Great Depression. We've had our ups and downs, but there hasn't been a really apocalyptic thing. But we wrote this book about a year before COVID. So I don't know. We'll see if COVID has improved our resilience just from environmental factors. But that would have been my answer, is we need to address how to help our kids be resilient, because maybe environmentally they haven't been encouraged to do so.
Well, and we touch on this in the book that there are, first of all, I guess I should say resilience is a very broad concept. It's the idea of being able to, survive the things that come at you, being strong enough to overcome challenges. And I think if we look at it in that way, we talk about intelligence, we talk about training, and we talk about all the different advantages that a person might go into adulthood with. But in the absence of resilience, it's really hard to imagine a person being very successful in any avenue, whether we're talking about, career success, or we're talking about relationship success, or we're talking about just like liking themselves when they look in the mirror on their 30th birthday. And that's a pretty important test all by itself. But then to Holly's point, the readership of our book is very varied, and we've gotten feedback from people in all sorts of cross sections. And some people are in the bucket where the life that would naturally be presented to their children is just too stinking easy, if I can say that. The child, through luck and fortune, doesn't have a lot of obstacles that they need to overcome physically or emotionally. And so that child is kind of destined to be, can I say floppy?
Crumply,
tended to be crumply if in the absence of challenge. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who, and I think COVID has increased the ratio in this direction, people who are have a lot of challenges, whether they be physical or emotional, and a lot of stresses. And then we as parents need to kind of step in, and we need to curate that to the right degree, so that the 4-year-old is receiving a smaller share of the reality of any given cataclysm than, say, the 16-year-old who's only 2 years from having to go approach such things as an adult. And so the book is really, it's meant to address that spectrum, because there are days when we're in one camp and there are days when we're in the other camp. And we need, as parents, to be able to shift a little bit back and forth and make sure that we're kind of presenting a childhood to our children that is productive and going to set them up for success.
You talk about the importance of the why and the how, and you talk about approaching problems as opportunities for education, and specifically using those as opportunities to teach kids the why and the how. Well, how does that look, and what does that mean?
All right. So teaching is a really big part of our premise in this whole book.
Yeah.
Your show is called Talking to Teens, and the kind of relationship that you want to have with your child, whatever age, I think should be one of a teacher, because you feel like you are, well, hopefully mutually learning, not just a dictatorship, but you're actually, yeah. Chris is giving the dictatorship signal. We try not to use that hand. If you have a relationship built on learning, you're going to have such better success with communicating to your child. Yeah. So the part that you're talking about is our slight nod to the folks who are having a little trouble with disciplining their kids. I tell my child to do something, or I insist that my teenager not have his earbuds in his ears all the time, and he just doesn't listen to me. If you can approach any of those topics, not with just, this is what I say and that is the law, but rather why it's important and how to do it. Okay, taking your earbuds out of yours is not too hard, but maybe it is. Maybe there are some slight subtleties about why a child needs earbuds. I don't know. Anyway, but maybe how to
to your point, I think that how to exist in life without earbuds in 24/7 is something that some teenagers feel is impossible. Like their head will implode in the absence of continuous stimulation. They really believe that. There's 200,000 years of humans evolution that shows that we can survive in the absence of earbuds, but some teenagers don't know that yet.
Okay, thank you. So it does apply.
And then it totally changes the way then people will interact with you, and places new demands on you in terms of you can't just like shut yourself off from interactions.
But there are consequences to that, right? There are consequences, and the relationship that is degraded because today I get to listen to a podcast during dinner, and that was entertaining for me, has a cost in terms of the relationship that I have with my brother and my sister and my family and whoever else is present, and decreases my ability to evolve as a human being who can interact in social settings. And social settings are like everything, his ability to interact with his future bosses, his ability to interact. I keep saying he because I know who she's talking about, and he's a young man. And but it could be
it's a theoretical example.
A theoretical example. No one we know has a teenager who has earbuds in all the time. I swear. And that there's a cost to that. And if we explain that, if we don't say, take your earbuds out, how many times have I told you? I've told you 1,000,000 times. Instead, we say, let's sit down and let's talk about this. It's like, do you want to live in a household where everybody hates each other, or at the very least dislikes each other? Or do you want to live in a household where you walk through the front door and you feel a sense of welcome? Which of those would you prefer? Well, presumably they're going to prefer, I guess I shouldn't speak for them. Hopefully you can have this conversation in context where they say, I'd rather be in that household, that warm feeling. It's like, okay, well, here are some of the things that are necessary for having that. It's not a given. It's not a given that we have good relationships with our family members. Like, we want them, but there are some people who turn 18 and they head out the door and they never, ever look back. And we want to help them see that their actions in their teenage years set the stage for what the next decade of their life is going to be. And they can make choices here and now that might be net positive for their experience, even if they miss that podcast.
So what you learning, you said, is a big part of the book, and another aspect of that is talking about creating a culture of learning. I mean, that seems like a big topic. How do we think about that as parents, and what are some ideas on sort of facilitating that in our household and creating a culture within our family of learning and growing?
So I ebb and flow with my ability to do this, I guess, with any action or any attempt at good parenting. When I'm really doing well with this culture of learning, it just feels good to be having new information come at me. I feel curious. I feel open to new possibilities. And when it's not going very well, I'm disinterested, and it feels like rote necessary duty. So
Yeah.
my current reflection on this is that we want to recognize when our learning is going well and when it isn't, and be willing to change course, which is a big part of resilience, by the way, is adapting when you notice that your current course of action is not taking you in the right direction where you want to go. And I'm just thinking about this because our current school project right now, I want to be learning about Africa with my kids. And I noticed that the program I set out for ourselves, it just was no fun anymore. And I said, you know what? We don't have to do it that way. Let's find a new way. And everyone was like, I could tell.
Yeah.
All right. But going back to a more overarching answer to your question, we want to model the kind of behavior that we expect to see in our kids, going back
Totally.
to the earbuds thing, right? If we don't want our kids to be tuning out to all of our conversations, we can't do the same thing to them.
Yeah. Right.
And if we want our kids to be really excited about learning, well, then we should be learning ourselves in a way that they can see right in front of them. Like I pick up a book too, or I have something to talk about at dinner too, because I'm excited to be learning.
And there are really two parts to that. She kind of alluded to this. One is that we as adults, as parents, need to be continually learning. And whether you're picking up a new language, or whether you're doing an evening certificate program, or you're going back to school, or just reading some decent nonfiction on a regular basis. So part one is we need to do that. Like if you expect your children to do that, then you need to do it. And we joke sometimes that what we really wanted to do is write a book for adults about how to be resilient themselves. But we've concluded that people would much rather tell other people how to be themselves.
Exactly.
But there's not a lesson in the book that you can't turn around and look in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, I could be more honest with myself about the how and why, about why things. I could improve myself as a person. I could have more integrity in learning.
Isn't that one of the things about parenting too? Is that it just makes you want to be such a better person yourself, and it's like
when it's going well, it does, right?
Yeah. But so many of those things in life that like we don't do for ourselves, but that we like do for other people, or when it becomes about someone else, we're like, oh wow, this is important. But parenting has that, kind of forces you to like re-examine yourself in a lot of ways, and seek to make some of those changes that you've been like kind of.
Absolutely.
I tell a story in the book, and it gets into the chapter of integrity. So sorry, I'm probably jumping ahead on your questions, but I tell a story in the book about clipping somebody's side view mirror. It's really annoying. Like I got to the stop sign. I thought, I think I heard something. What was that sound?
That was the sound of $1,000 flitting out of your pocket.
It's like, no. I'm sure it was nothing. And I pulled ahead to the next stoplight. I was like, no, I bet that was something. And I convinced myself to drive back and pull around. And it was because of that very thing that you're talking about, Andy, that I realized I have been talking to my kids about honesty, about integrity, what that means. And if I don't go back, I am breaking my rules.
Yeah. There's, back to the idea of learning as well as integrity, is that if we want our kids to have learning in their lives, we need to have learning in our lives. If we want our kids to have integrity in their lives, we need to have integrity. But there's a second piece. And, Holly's story of the side view mirror and the $1,000 that never was is a good example. Is like they're both, there's doing it, and then there's talking about it and making a lesson
has to be visible to them. Or
you
could be learning stuff at work all day that they don't know about, and having lots of integrity all day at the office. But if it's not visible to your family, then there's no modeling happening.
Exactly. And I think integrity is the hardest one of these, because integrity doesn't look like anything. A failure of integrity looks like something, right?
Yeah.
So you could spend 18 years in front of your child and have perfect integrity, never lie, never cheat, never steal, never be dishonest in any way, shape, or form. But in the absence of someone saying like, hey, did you notice how even though that was challenging, he told the truth, then it doesn't look like anything. Failures of integrity kind of jump out really quickly. But integrity is something, it's walking across a tightrope every day of our lives. And it's worth saying like, hey, I admit it, like I'm human. Like it was tempting to ignore that side view mirror. Like part of me is like, trying to convince myself it's nothing. But then you go and you do what's right because it's what's right. And that's what integrity means. And so there are these lessons that we get to draw out, and it hurts. It would be so much easier to pretend in front of our children, just as we like pretending in front of the rest of the world that we're perfect.
Yeah, right. And so often these struggles happen internally, and we don't talk about it. We don't want to show that we're really struggling with something, because we feel like we shouldn't be like that as a parent. And, a kid doesn't necessarily even know that $1,000 is so painful for us. If we don't, even if they see us stop and, put a note on the windshield or do whatever we do to correct the situation like that, they don't even necessarily understand that we had this kind of moment of like, and that even next week it's still affecting us because now our budget's tighter, and whatever the thing is. A lot of times we sort of like bear these burdens silently as parents or something like that, but actually it doesn't necessarily do a service to our children to just not talk about it.
I was getting a vision of dinner table conversations. I don't know what your household was like, Andy, but mine when I was a teenager was every attempt to stay silent. My parents desperately wanted to connect with me, and I was having none of it. And I remember it was always the same question, like, how was school?
Right.
So let's start easy. How was school?
Fine.
Fine. Good answer. Solid answer. No.
And after several attempts, then they would give up and they would move on to talking about what happened at the business that day, which really didn't matter to me. So
you didn't even have earbuds to escape to either,
right?
No, yeah, no. I just had my glowering presence.
I've seen pictures of her as a teenager. She glowered. It was amazing. Quite a glower.
Oh man. So it's a bit of a random note, but I think it's really important that we find topics that we can all be truly interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so, I find Chris and I are doing it more now because we don't have young ones who demand young one attention. We're like, we're remembering what it's like to have adult conversation again. But sometimes I think we do it at the expense of connecting with our kids. We were like, let's talk taxes, dear. Okay. And, or like just the real heavy COVID stuff, and I've noticed this kind of shift of, well, then, okay, the kids will go talk in their world of their fantasy novels, and we'll go talk in our unattainable world of adult realities. And we need to come back and find something that we all are interested in.
Yeah.
Or we'll find that just keeps that divide gets wider and wider.
Well, and that's just basic good conversation skills. Asking questions. How was school is not a good conversation starter. It's right up there with, do you come here often? Like those both belong in the same bucket, as they just probably don't need to be used ever again by anyone. And there's such blanket statements, right? How was school? It's just like, fine is fine. I think is the appropriate answer, but if we're involved at the level that we can and should and want to be involved, then, it's like, what happened in history class today? Because last week you told me that in history class this happened.
Yeah,
and what was the follow on to that? And, is, Mrs. Baker still being annoying? And,
right.
And if you have very specific questions, it's funny. It's a weird parallel, but in teaching martial arts, part of keeping the lesson centered on the student is to not have a lot of details about oneself as an instructor. And it's just a tactic. Right. And so if somebody says, how was your weekend? You say, fine. It's easy. So student walks in, sensei walks in, karate instructor walks into the room. They say, "How was your weekend?" Karate instructor say, "Fine." But if they know more about your life, then they start saying, "Is like, how was your beach place this weekend?" And it's a little harder to just say, "Fine." It's like,
Right.
did the storm come through? Because I heard there was a storm there in Southern Virginia where you were staying at your beach house. Like if they have specifics, how's your Aunt Millie? When we have specifics, then it's harder to just say fine. You can't say fine to specific questions, but it's easy. And so in the inverse, where you do want to be making a connection with the individuals across the table from you, saying really blanket, stupid sounds ill thought out, weak questions will result in weak answers. And we need to delve, but delving requires effort. It requires knowing. Remember paying attention last week when they said that their history teacher was assigning a project that they thought was unreasonable.
You have to remember.
And then you need to scribble notes and keep track of all your kids' teachers.
The other side of it is making sure to share something from your day. Maybe instead of asking a question, say, offer something, right? Something personal from your day. Going back to, you learned a whole lot of things at work. Well, maybe what specifically you're working on the computer doesn't matter to them, but perhaps the relationship that you have with somebody and, fighting over the water cooler. Hopefully, you know what I mean.
So what she's trying to say is you need to curate your experience during the day and share the aspects of it that might be relevant to your audience, which again,
kind of be able to connect with something in their day too, or something. And then they give you a nice little leeway to say, like, to tie it to them and ask them a question. And I just think
that, again, that's just good conversation.
Yeah. 100%. And like, I don't know. I hate it when people just don't offer anything and then ask me a question like, "Oh, how was your day? Did anything happen at school?" Like that. It feels a little lazy. It feels like you're investing no energy or effort to, like what we said, remember something from earlier and bring back something specific, or say something interesting from your own experience and then relate it to me. Or it's like, so you're just like, entertain me, tell me something
dance
good,
puppy dance.
Yeah. And like, it feels like you don't really care about the answer, because if you really cared, you would be like doing what you guys said, "Oh my God, you had that thing today with whatever, with the assembly that you were looking forward to, and the thing, what was that like, and how was the whatever, and did that thing happen in third period like you were going to be doing, and what was that awkward or whatever?" And now all of a sudden I feel like you really care. You're actually interested, whereas like, "Oh, how was school?" I feel like you're just trying to make conversation, and then you're actually putting it on me to make the conversation. And and as teenagers, especially, like, we don't like being like told what to do or like forced what to do or something. And we resist that type of, it's like a command. It's like a tacit command, like, entertain me, make some conversation. And we don't like that. So we resist that and we say, nothing, fine, whatever. Hey, we're here with Chris and Holly Santillo talking about how to raise more resilient teenagers. And we're not done yet. Here's a look at what's coming up in the second half of the show.
There is a false dichotomy in our society that if you want your kids to be independent or connected, you have to give up the others. And it just isn't true. We can have it all. Absolutely. Well, and in the martial arts, this is always described as the cup overflowing. You need to fill your own cup in order to have anything to share. And there are many stories that center around this idea of this cup. And if you're always emptying your cup, if you're always giving of yourself to others, eventually you run dry. And if all you focus on is filling your own cup and you never share with others, then it just overflows and it's a big waste. And that the key is to make sure that you're always filling your cup, and then you're also offering of your cup to others.
You mentioned struggles and physical struggles. And I thought one of the best things that our family has done has to seek out physical struggles that we do together.
Ooh, I like that.
Ours is hiking. We love hiking. We love trying to find the next challenge, the next, what's our new record going to be? This was the coldest hike we've ever done, or the longest one, or it was the darkest one, or the kids just jump on this.
The most miserable.
We had the most miserable so far. And I have to tell you, that was the one where, as we were coming down, the sense of connection and joy and being able to like already talk about our war stories of climbing up this volcano.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Want to hear the full interview? Sign up for a subscription today. You get access to all the interviews I've conducted, as well as new episodes weeks before the general public. It's completely affordable, and your subscription helps support the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Thanks for listening.